Hello, Mud fam, and welcome to another episode of the Mudwater Podcast. I'm your host, Sarah Russell, this time speaking with Malek Asfeer, who stands out in the cannabis industry for his pivotal role in the 2015 legalization of CBD in 22 states, achieved through compelling storytelling and his key role in defining Charlotte's Web's brand aesthetic during its foundational years from 2014 to 2021. Equally notable is his dedication to humanitarian causes, where he has organized psychedelic retreats for refugees and immigrants, aiming to transform consciousness and promote healing in the Middle East. His commitment to human betterment is deeply personal, stemming from his own experience of fleeing his homeland at 19 to escape a death sentence, a journey that profoundly connects him with the notion of aiding others. Hello, Malek, and welcome to the pod.
Hi, thanks for having me.
I'm so glad to have you here. And before we dive into all of the things that I want to talk to you about, that last line of your introduction is a big line. It's a heavy line. And I want to take a moment to acknowledge the gravity of that, where you had to flee your homeland and how that helped spur your purpose of helping others. But are you willing to share a little bit of that journey?
Sure. You might have to help me through it, but I am very cautious about how I share my story and what to share from it, because there's a tendency to kind of use my journey and my own suffering through my journey as an ammunition to attack my own people. So it's hard to be genuine and authentic in sharing that story without watching for that. But I was a writer my teenage, and through that I challenged few principles within the government, within the society, either through the religious the religious establishment in Saudi, or just kind of the things that we seem to think are normal. And through that caused many people to hate me and many people to seek to kill me, and it made it really clear that I needed to leave the country after my high school year. So I came to the U.S. When I was 19, and I wasn't familiar with the language, the culture, or know anyone here. So had to start from there.
I'm really sorry you were threatened and that your safety was in jeopardy. That's absolutely tragic. I'm so sorry. And
it's part of the journey, right? Like, it's part of everyone's journey. We all have those pivotal moments that kind of shape who we are, and I see it that way.
Yeah, I think of those as origin stories, like those moments that really shaped us in the crucible of life. And just something that you mentioned when you started talking about this, the ability to be out, the ability to be able to share our authentic selves, our authentic experiences, it feels like it comes with so much privilege to be able to do that. And if we're talking about the hierarchy of privilege, like who actually gets to say what their experiences are and not be threatened or not be put in harm's way, I think there's a lot of privilege that comes with being able to be authentically yourself.
Absolutely. I think people, at least here in the Western culture in the US, and I can see it, people don't realize how much privilege they have, and they just go throughout their day not even participating on clear matters that happening around the world, and the reason for that is just because it's inconvenient to think about that. And it comes to my mind is like, yeah, it's a privilege to get to a point where you get to choose not to talk about things. And there are many people who are imprisoned, killed, dying, to have this simple privilege to actually just utter the truth, their own truth.
Right. My mom dated a Persian man through my adolescence. And I remember I was in my freshman year of high school, and we were assigned the task of interviewing somebody that had been in a war. And it was supposed to be a nonfiction piece. And then we brought it into the teacher and we shared it. and I decided to interview my mom's boyfriend at the time because he had been involved in some conflict. He's from Iran, and he had been in some conflict that had been going on in Iran at the time, and he shared a story with me about how he received a bullet in his leg during one of the altercations that he was involved in. And I wrote this story for my high school English class, and I took it in, and my teacher gave me a failing grade because he said I made the whole thing up. Because it wasn't a war that the United States was acknowledging. It wasn't a war that was in the history books that we were learning from in that school. And he basically told me I was a liar for talking about this conflict that was happening in the Middle East at the time. Even though I had an eyewitness survivor talk to me about this, his experience was completely disregarded. Like, oh no, that actually didn't happen. And so that dismiss it, like even when somebody is coming forward and sharing their experience and some horrific experience that they went through, this ability that those of us that are raised in relative safely, and I want to say a certain amount of ignorance, can even dismiss, like, actually, like that experience that you're sharing that you're saying was so horrific for you. I don't even believe it happened.
Yeah, that's absolutely. I think we have a culture that's somehow disconnected from its own self, therefore it's connected from the world and what's going on. So we measure our own experience and we use that as a lens to measure people's experience. So there is no way this is real because it could never happen to me, or it will never happen to anyone I know. And we are gradually seeing that, that idea unveil in our daily life, because people are more touched by things happening in the world now than they have ever been in the past few decades here in the US, either through veterans who go to war overseas, or even just tourists who are in these places that get to come back and tell the stories. But within even that, we are not when we share our story, our story is used against our own people, right? Like I mentioned before. But when Westerners share their story, it has more weight to it and value than our own story, because the things we tend to say and the experiences we go through, there's no way people here can imagine what that's look like. Therefore, they don't connect with it, or in your case, they will dismiss it because it's easier to do that than try to imagine what that looked like. And in reality, we don't even want people to imagine. We just want to be heard and seen in our own journey, and not be we don't look for pity. We are not looking for any of that. We want our story to be heard and seen as it is, without it being taken out of context and used, or being dismissed, like you said.
So it seems like a large part of your work, a large part of your passion and your purpose is helping refugees and immigrants not only be seen and understood, but assist them with their trauma and their healing in some way. Would you talk a little bit about why you're passionate about this, how you're passionate about this, how this manifests in your life?
Yeah, so within my own journey, I know I had a lot of trauma to go over, and I needed to find a way to work through that, to kind of just take a step back. I think it was 2018 or so when I did my first psychedelic ceremony. It was with psilocybin. And that experience kind of opened the floodgate. My friends intended for that to help me just because they know what I've been through, but also they weren't aware of the damage that could happen if you are not familiar with trauma, heavy trauma, and opening the floodgate that way can be absolutely harmful. And in a way it was, because after that ceremony, I became suicidal. It took me so long to kind of figure out what to do with this now. I experienced different things in my life, but I lived in a survival mode that didn't allow me to process any of it or even acknowledge it. So having that ceremony opened the floodgate in a way that, okay, now I'm feeling all of these experiences, all this pain, all this suffering all at once, and there is no way for me to process it. My toolbox have nothing that is applicable for this experience. And so I spent almost a year just going through and trying to develop my new toolbox that could allow me to process these things and allow me to understand how to work through them. Within all of that journey, I came to realize the power of psychedelic, but also the potential damage that could happen. So I started thinking about how can I facilitate, how can I organize retreats for people like me. And that's how it's all started. And we started the planning after that, ceremonies for refugees and immigrants, specifically Arab refugees and immigrants, with the goal just to heal people. But then when I started going deeper and deeper, recognizing that a lot of the research and studies that are being done right now, like if you are looking at the medicine that's going through the FDA pipeline, like I'm not going to name any company, but like if you look at one of the most prominent one that is going through phase 3 right now, their phase 1 trial was very specific demographics, 98 or something percent white people, and specific demographics, specific race, specific gender. And you see that even in phase 2, which I think it was 92, and then phase 3 is 88 or something like that. And it just becomes very clear. Are we developing medicine for everyone when the industry claim that we are here to heal people? People like me are here to ensure that they deliver and that message, and it's healing all people, not specific group of people. Because if we are looking at the numbers, there's 300 something thousand veterans with PTSD in the US. There's over 100 million refugees, and it's just increasing day by day. And we're not even thinking about that. We're not interested to know what that experience is like and how we can heal that. So, but at the end of the day, we are developing a drug that then will be prescribed to everyone. Yet we don't know what that will do to anyone out of these specific demographics. So it's kind of scary when we think about it, and when we look at all these studies, it's like, why are we doing this? And we all know why. We've been doing this same method of specific demographics, specific gender for decades now, and most of our mental health is based on that. Like if we look back at, even our therapy is based on Freud, which is like, who were the people that he actually developed all of that on, like students, wealthy or upper class. So my goal is to disrupt that and change that. So when we did the ceremony last year with ayahuasca, the majority were Saudi women, and we did a study on that, with the goal of understanding how could these medicine work with our community, our people.
Thank you for sharing all of that.
Yeah.
I want to take a moment to recognize you naming suicidal ideation in the course of all of this, because, I've talked on this podcast so many times before about the importance of set and setting. But again, often set and setting, when I'm looking at the literature, I'm listening to other podcasts, it's talking about it from like a white demographic. It's talking about it from a certain socioeconomic standpoint, like what do you have access to resource-wise? How much are the treatments costing? What's the environment that you're able to afford to be able to have these experiences in? And we know that pre-integration and post-integration is super important, but if we're doing that from a white-bodied, wealthier perspective about what people, and everyone has their human homework, right? Like I'm not here to compare traumas in people. If you've experienced something that's hard for you, people are suicidal for all kinds of reasons. I really want to destigmatize suicidal ideation on this podcast as well. This is something that people genuinely struggle with. We're in a mental health crisis, like we know that. But needing to tailor it depending on the multiple marginalizations that people experience, rather than assuming there's a one-size-fits-all, and that one-size-fits-all is a white, wealthy male body. And there are like so many other factors that we need to include in the set and setting. And, you know, even naming the suicidal ideation after an experience like that, like, I think within this quote unquote psychedelic renaissance, which is problematic language, right? Because we've taken a lot of these medicines from indigenous communities, put them into medicalized, sterile, basically white-bodied environments. So we're already losing a lot of the community support piece that these medicines, encompassed. But also in all of this, recognizing that you go in and have a psychedelic experience and it's not rainbows and unicorns and butterflies. And like now you've talked to God and the angels started singing. But if you've experienced trauma on a deep level and you haven't had enough support in order to be able to integrate that in a way, or like you're still not in a safe environment, that the level of dysregulation that can happen under the influence of psychedelics, like, do you have people that can help you put yourself back together after the medicines like take you apart and show you all of the things that you need to face? So being able to track for multiply marginalized people, and by that I largely mean Black folk, brown folk, non-binary folk, women, like whoever, like all of these like intersectional marginalized identities, being able to go, do you have a web of care to help you put yourself back together after you're taken apart by all the epiphanies that might come through under the use of psychedelics?
Absolutely. I think I mentioned this before. The aspect of ceremony is 1/3 and 2/3 is the actual integration. And there isn't really much value, I believe, from what I've seen in the industry on that aspect of it. And understanding, like each person that comes to the ceremonies with me, which I don't facilitate, I work with an indigenous group that carry this medicine, but I just organize it. And within organizing that, I ensure that, well, we have a pre-integration session where the person can talk to a therapist, and they have to fill this long form to ensure that this is something right for them. And then I have people who are smarter than me that can tell me, oh, I don't think this person is good fit for this. It might cause them more harm. And then I trust that. So there's all these steps that we take before we actually have the ceremony. And from what I've seen in the underground kind of psychedelic ceremonies and all this, it's like there isn't really understanding of what that look like, because most of the people who are doing these are people who are privileged. Because, I mean, we have to name that. You don't get to have a ayahuasca ceremony without spending a couple $1,000s, and who have that kind of money, right? It's like even the people that come to these ceremonies, I am raising funds or I'm paying for it myself, because most people have to choose whether they spend that couple $1,000s on a ceremony or they pay for rent and their kids' food and basic stuff. So it's you have to be privileged to be in these spaces. And I do recognize my privilege in that too, even though I'm an immigrant. I worked to make it this far in my journey, but still I would have not been here if I didn't have that privilege. And seeing what's happening in the space is like, yeah, you haven't been through war and it shows. You haven't lost your home and family and it shows. And so, and I'm not trying to compare trauma, even though I got to a point in my life now where like I think trauma differ, like there are different type of trauma and different level of trauma, and I've seen some of the worst trauma on this planet, and I've seen the simpler, smaller type of things, but you can't compare these two. Someone who lost everything, who watched their kids die in front of them, harvested, and then you come and tell me about your issues with your father. Like, these aren't the same trauma, and what might come up to you in your journey is different what might come up to that person, and we have to understand that. We can't be just brushing through all of it. Is like we can't just one brush and this is gonna be fixed through this ceremony. Here, come, and because I had this amazing experience, therefore you must have this amazing experience. It doesn't work that way.
So I am a Qigong teacher as well. And I would hold retreats where people would come and we do breath work, we do meditation, we do mindful movement. And people would have those like aha moments or those enlightened moments. They'd have those wonderful moments where all of a sudden they would realize how to reconcile with their father. They would realize that they forgave, their kid for whatever. And even at that level, after the week-long retreat would be over, if people would go back home and they wouldn't continue doing the work, they wouldn't continue like talking to people, doing the qigong, they would lose all of the knowing that they gained, or they wouldn't know how to integrate like the enlightened moment into the mundane moment, and they would like break. There would be this spiritual heartbreak that would happen where people would become super dysregulated after that. And I can't even imagine how much more so that would be true of someone who has seen war, seen death, seen atrocities in the world, where like whatever the initial moment is, if you don't have that ability when you go back home to be able to hold it in some way, like the damage that could do. So you were saying that you really care about that post-integration, that people like fill out these intake forms, they can talk to someone beforehand, then they have the experience. But what does that look like after? Like when people go back home and go, okay, I've had this experience now, then what?
That's a great question. And also I want to add to it is different when you are born in this culture and you do this experience and you go back to what's familiar to you. And with the immigrant and refugees, they're not going back to what they're familiar to. They're going back to a language that they barely can speak, or they're going back to a community that doesn't look like them, doesn't sound like them, doesn't do the things that they want to do. They're going back to music, art, all lifestyle that is absolutely different than what their heart desire and what's familiar to them. And that's a huge piece out of this too. Like when we are thinking of the post-integration is like, how can we cultivate a community for the group of people that came together that can lean on each other as they move forward in this culture that is not there, but they're trying to make it through it. So we do integration circles every few weeks then we transition to few months, and we keep in touch with each other, even as simple as groups, and we send each other memes and jokes and just news as we see fit. And we also do provide all the participants with options to see different therapists, and I want to be clear on that too, because even within therapy, it took me a while to find the right people. I had to vet, make sure that one, they understand the culture, they speak Arabic, they are familiar with the medicine, in this case ayahuasca, and they are licensed therapists. And that list gets shrunk really quick when you are putting these filters on. So by the end of the ceremony, everyone gets a list of at least 3 different therapists that they can follow up with. If they like the person they talked to before coming to the ceremony, they can continue doing that. And if it is financial, if it comes at financial burden, I do my best to also help with that and assist with that. And a lot of these therapists actually do their best to cut their fees for this.
Amazing. So there are a lot of different healing modalities out there. And I'm curious, what made you choose psychedelics specifically for this community? Can you talk about Unlimited Sciences and the research they're conducting around the use of ayahuasca for immigrants and refugees? You talked about your experience with psilocybin. Why psilocybin? Why ayahuasca? Why not something like, why was this the path that you chose?
So ayahuasca is a community medicine. You can't do it one-on-one, but its benefit and its power is more in a community. And I believe because we got this trauma in a community, we must heal them in a community. And that's why ayahuasca came to the picture. Working with Unlimited Sciences has been brilliant because from day one, when I reached out to them, I told them about the idea and what I'm doing. They provided all the support they could, and then they built this entire study for our community specifically. Dr. Matthew Lowe, who led the study along with Dr. Robin Gerhardt Harris, they both partnered to actually make this study possible. And I believe they are going through a second review now, and it should be published within the next couple of months.
Amazing. On your website, there's a quote. It says, "We have a community that is abused from different sides, and no one is providing these people ways to heal and processing their trauma." Would you be willing to speak about this abuse from the different sides that refugees are experiencing this trauma from?
Yes. When I organized this, I was thinking about my own friends and the people from my community, the human rights activists, journalists, and people who went through this trauma, and they are given this stage to share and open their wound so everyone can come and point at it and touch it. And you see them on CNN, you see them on all of these platforms and Western media, and you think to yourself, it's like, okay, so they are sharing this trauma just so it can frame the Arab world as savages and all of these things, but no one actually helping them heal from their journey. And we are in a culture that incentivizes victimhood, right? So if you are a victim, we do our best to keep you as a victim. We'll give you all the platforms, all the things, so you can just continue being victim with no potential of healing to be who you are beyond what happened to you. My goal in life is not to be known by what's been done to me or what was written about me, but to be known by who I am on the path I choose to take and what I write about myself. And I did the best in my life not to lean on my trauma to build my life, but lean on my strength and resilience, which both of these sides I got from my own people, right? I got the trauma, but also I got the strength and resilience that allowed me to survive that. But within the Western world, we don't talk about that. And so I've seen my friend go through all of that, go through the media, the platforms. They are put on pedestal just to talk about their own wounds. And at the end of the day, they go home and no one actually is there to hold them in that hurt, in that pain that they went through. We just treat this trauma as something that could happen and then we can walk away and talk about it, but it's not that. It's actually years of work of feeling it, of understanding how to work with it. And if we are living in a culture that allow that, and not only allow that, but reward it, and we're not letting anyone actually heal from it, we're just taking advantage of people. We're using these people. So you have that side of it, and then you have the side of where they came from. They came from painful history. They came, whether they are human rights activists in a country that is oppressive and doesn't allow that, whether they lost family members for that government, or they come through from war and losing home, losing families, and traveling thousands of miles on foot to actually make it somewhere where they can be safe. It's like all of that, that's also using people in a different way. So within both of these worlds, it's hard for us to find a place for ourselves that allow us to exist and allow us to feel our pain and not be like, oh, show me your scars so I can see how much of value you are to me.
Show me your scars so I can see how much value you are to me. That rings heavily true. I know we have a culture where people are competing to be the biggest victim because it's only the person who's screaming the loudest, who's in the most pain, who gets any attention. You know, it's one of those things where you have to be in crisis before people feel like they deserve resourcing or before people like are motivated to give resourcing in some way. So there's already this competition to be the biggest victim. And then I agree with you, and I don't mean to put words into your mouth, but my interpretation then of another piece that you were talking about is how many people in power really want us empowered and being our best selves and our brightest selves and our shiniest selves So there becomes this like, yeah, go over here and scrap with each other for like the scarcity of resources, and you better be the one that's in the most pain. Otherwise, you're not going to get enough. And oh, by the way, we could help you out, but we don't actually want to help you out that much, because if we did help you out, then you might have a voice and you might have an opinion, and that might shake up the status quo, and we don't want that either. And so definitely like people getting caught between a rock and a hard place and all of that, where how much genuine mutual aid, mutual care. I was talking about this with a teacher of mine recently, where if we're genuinely going to help people who are suffering and in crisis in some way, that means those of us that are suffering less or have more resources in some way, we're going to have to overextend. We're going to have to excessively caregive. We're going to have to give more than we want to in order to help people that don't have as much as they need. And I mean, it's scarcity all around. It's activation all around. The U.S. news cycle thrives on trauma porn and activating people and making sure that people feel as helpless and desperate and destitute as possible, because then that also limits them from wanting to take action and feeling like there's something they can do. And so it is this vicious cycle of just keeping people down.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think we have to break that, though. I'm going to share this because I think it's relevant to this. As I was trying to raise funds for the retreat last year and even this year and coming up in 2024, I've struggled finding people. I've knocked on every door. I've talked to all these people who are talking on all these platforms about helping people and supporting communities and making sure they throw in all these words about diversity and inclusion and all of these things. And I knocked on every door, talked to everyone, and I could not find someone who is willing to fund our study or fund these retreats. I instead was told, Malek, to be honest with you, people are like afraid of refugees and immigrants. They don't want them in this country. And here you are trying to raise money to heal them. That's going to be hard. And I was told also by someone else that what I'm doing is not marketable. And at the end of the day, I was like, okay, I don't care about all of this. I'm going to fund it myself. And I did with my friends and my community here. Just like 4 of us ended up paying for the whole thing. And it does carry a lot of weight, because though I could do that, it's not something sustainable for me. So like when I did this year retreat, I did not have the financial means to actually do that. I still figured a way to do it, but there isn't support for any of that. And that goes back to what you're saying, like they don't see benefit out of this. It's not marketable. And so we don't care about these people. We could let them suffer. And it's very obvious when you look at the news, when you look everywhere, refugees are demonized. We're looked as if we just were born out of nothing. Is not that the Western world that invaded our countries, killed our people, colonized our people, stole the mining and the natural resources of our land caused that. We are just a result of, we're just savages in the eyes of the Western world. We're not worthy of that. We are just demonized. There's no humanity in us. And so it becomes obvious as I go through and knock on these doors and try to change minds and hearts and try to actually make a difference. Who are the people who are coming to support these causes? It shows you there aren't many.
Yeah, if refugees and immigrants are painted as savages, then that justifies colonization and going and extracting resources from where they live. Like, oh, you don't deserve this. Like we know what to do with this better than you do. And if we dehumanize people, if we other people, then if we take away their humanity, if we devalue them, then there's justification for extracting all of the resources and not giving more support. And you can tell my voice probably changed a little bit. Like I'm getting a little fired up about this. If there are other people that like hearing your words when you just said that, and letting the truth of that sink in. If they're experiencing the rage that I'm feeling creep up in my body, if they're experiencing the grief that I'm feeling flooding my body, what can they do?
Reach out to Unlimited Sciences, reach out to me, other people. Invest, even if you don't want to invest in this specific study, invest in studies that are centering people of color, Black people, and like even indigenous. Like we stole these medicine from them, but we're not providing any support to actually help bridge all of these states that now are legalizing and doing all of these things. But like we're not doing enough to support all of these communities. So if you're not interested in funding this study, there are many groups out there that actually trying to center people of color and minorities.
This feels a little bit like the psychedelic equivalent of paying rent. So this idea, like I'm here in Santa Cruz, California, this is Amamutsan tribal band land. This idea of like paying real rent, that I'm going to, the fact that anyone thinks they can own land anyway is deeply problematic and a colonizer mentality, right? But okay, so like the land that I'm occupying right now is stolen land. It's unceded territory. And so I'm going to pay my real rent to indigenous communities in the area that are stewards of the land as this way to, say, hey, this sucks right now, the situation that we're all in. And this is how I'm going to like try to do like some small piece to make it better. And I feel like psychedelics really needs this piece. Like the psychedelics really need, like, what's the real rent equivalent to the indigenous communities, to the Black and brown folk, to the marginalized folks that we get these medicines from? How can we get it in the hands of other Black and brown marginalized folks? So I do think for those of us, I'm white, like, how are we paying real rent within the psychedelic movement that's happening right now? So that, again, this is global rent, right? So that we're actually remembering ayahuasca as a community medicine. So if we're in community with each other, what does that mean? Does that mean we're just in community with people that look like us? Like, hell no, of course not. That's not what we want. So this is a little bit of like, walk the talk. If you are saying these are community medicines and like you think that they hold all of this benefit, then let's make sure that we're putting this in the hands of the people. First of all, in the hands of the people that gifted us this, like how are we taking care of them? And then how are we taking care of the people that really need access to this and not just the people that are the top of that privileged hierarchical ladder?
Absolutely. I can't say it any better. I think it's very clear as we move forward, we will see this happen more and more, and we'll know if the community, the psychedelic community that is benefiting from the psychedelic right now, actually participate in the growth of this industry in a healthy and cautious perspective. Like we are building all of these things on the shoulders of many, many thousands of indigenous people that carried it. Some of them sacrificed their life for it. And it's not enough to just sit in a ceremony and just say, I acknowledge that this medicine, this is just your way, like people's way of just checking the list so now they can go and party and do their thing. It's not that. It's actually action and doing things, going and listening to the community, to the medicine carriers, and see what they actually have to say, and not be like, oh, we can't do it that way because it's not possible. You go and listen and not say anything, and then find a way to actually help them achieve their goals, because they've been carrying this for hundreds, if not thousands of years, and you owe it to them. If you are using that medicine, if you're benefiting from that medicine, you owe it to the people that carry that. It's simple. I don't even know why we have to talk about it, but it's becoming very obvious in the industry that we don't really care, and we've done that even with cannabis and the way we extracted that, and we still have people imprisoned for cannabis. The majority are Black people, and the executives of all these cannabis companies are white men, and we're like, so yeah, it seems like we're about to do the same thing with psychedelic, and that scares me because psychedelic operate differently, right? Like there could be not only the social aspect damage from it, like the people who need to actually benefit from this, who carried this, and you are standing on their shoulder, but also then the people who are participating in these ceremonies thinking, oh, this is the promise, right? We're going to heal and we're going to do better and all my trauma will be gone after I do this. And then they go in there and they're absolutely shattered and there's no one or anything that could put them back together. So all of these will become more obvious, and we are seeing that. So the only thing we can do is do our best that we can build a healthy practice, a healthy way of doing it.
So I heard you say there are 3 things people can do. One is go to indigenous leaders, like go and actually be around indigenous people who are working with these medicines. 2, once you're there, listen rather than offering your advice, your opinions, your suggestions, your perspective. Listen. And then whatever you hear them say, go out and do that.
Yeah.
Take that action.
It's simple, right?
I mean, I'm a fan of Paulo Freire's Pedagogy of the Oppressed, which has been around forever, which like laid it out very clearly for us. Oh, you want to help oppressed and marginalized people? Then let them tell you what they need. Don't go in and tell them what they need and what to do. Like, go and listen, and then whatever they tell you, go do that thing. And that's how you can actually be helpful to people that are having a hard time.
Yeah. As we did the ceremony last year, and while we are in the ceremony, an article came out, and they used a picture of a refugee camp, and there are people who started hashtags and videos on social media, TikToks, and all this stuff attacking the organizer, and which is me, right? And at that time, I was still at the ceremony space. We finished, but we usually take a few days after just to integrate and be together, eat good food, dance, just be present. And I got text on my phone and people were telling me about it. And I looked around me and I said this to the community as like the only people that I will listen to their opinion are the people in this room, which are the participants, the therapist, and the medicine carrier. Those are the only people I'll listen to what they have to say. And it's really nice to see white men creating videos attacking me, telling me what I can and can't do for my own people. It's like you colonize us, you do all these things to us, and then you want to decide how we choose to heal. No, you don't get to do that. And so that's basically what I came out of after that last day of ceremony, just realizing that within all this journey, I was not able to find support from these large companies or anyone really within the industry other than Unlimited Sciences and Ajna Biosciences. No one else actually helped me through that. And then I was told that, oh, you shouldn't be doing this way. So it became very clear that who are the people that I'm willing to listen to as I move in this space. I am always going to be guided and doing my best to listen and do what I'm told by the medicine carriers, the people I'm trying to serve, and then the therapist and the people who have the knowledge to tell me, oh, there are better ways to do this. That's about it.
That's incredibly powerful. And it's a path with a lot of integrity. And I imagine a very difficult path to go. These are the people I'm listening to. These are the people that are never uplifted. These are the people that are villainized and demonized and othered constantly. And actually, they're the voices that I care about. Like, that's so little support from the powers that be and the people that actually can move the money or offer the spaces or provide the funding. That's a tough path, but like much respect.
Yeah. And I do want to say that, yes, it's a difficult path. And yes, like being refugees, being immigrants, it's a tough path to take. But I have never met a refugee or an immigrant that is not strong enough to be who they are. They're some of the strongest, most resilient people you could ever meet in your life. These are people who lost everything. And I don't think people understand what I mean by everything. Every aspect of your daily life. You no longer can wake up and go to the job you're used to. The home you're familiar with, you don't have. The kids that are around you are no longer around you, and the only thing left of them is just the memories in your mind. They lost everything. And despite it all, they cross the globe to be where they are. They do all of that. Years to just make it. Learn a new language. Find a new career path that has nothing to do with what they did before. And try to salvage what they have left of themselves. It's unimaginable, and I think a lot of people don't understand what it takes for an immigrant to just walk the street close to you. So I just want to paint that picture because I think it's an important picture to have. As we talk about this, it's not just numbers. These aren't just 100 million refugees in the world. These are people that woke up every day and chose to keep moving despite everything that they're facing. And how many of the people around us I could say that to?
I think you're so right that people can't fathom what that experience has been like unless you've personally experienced it. And I think when people try to, they get overwhelmed by trying to imagine what that experience is like, and it creates a sense of inaction. Like, I can't do anything about it. This is too hard for me to even think about. And I really want to encourage our listeners as they're listening to you and the beautiful way that you're articulating all of this, to let this light a fire in your hearts, that there are people like Malek out in the world who are doing things to help this community. And there are things that you can do. And there are ways that you can show up and be present within the struggle without letting the grief of it take you under. Like, don't let this make you be immobile around all of this. Like, I really want to encourage people to let this fire them up, so that there are things that we can do in order to support this community. And when you're...
It's very easy to get discouraged, right? You see the scale of the pain and you're just like, I don't know what I can do. And what you said is perfect. And I think there's a lot of ways we can participate. Even any city I've been to, there's communities, there's either indigenous groups that are doing different activations, different rallies, different actions, walk into the Capitol when there's a talk about psychedelic. There are different groups that are doing that, and there are different immigrant and refugees organizations in each city that actually introduce you to the people in your community. So you can either mentor or help with the language, or just, it doesn't have to be financial, just show up and see these people as human and be with them and understand their culture. I can promise you, you'll get out of it with at least great food.
That feels really true. I really love that. Thank you for that peace, that lightness, that joy. And for giving people alternatives, where if people are feeling financially strapped for whatever reason, giving them other opportunities to just be with someone and human with somebody else and recognize that that's going to have an effect as well that's super beneficial to all of us. Mm-hmm. And, you mentioned how hard it is for a refugee or an immigrant to just walk by people on the street. And one of the things that I do want to make sure we touch on is in the study that included mostly women from North Africa and the Middle East. Do you know the study that I'm talking about? Is this the one with the Saudi women? Is this the same? Okay. So with the Saudi women, that study showed after an ayahuasca retreat that the women experienced a significant reduction in shame. And shame is it's the big one, right? Like, if shame is driving us, if shame is what we're walking around carrying, it affects everything in our lives. And so can you speak more about the shame in this community, why it's important to heal the shame, how you're helping heal the shame in this community?
I won't be able to answer it as perfect as the people who experience that when I'm not Saudi woman. And my experience, I just want to acknowledge that my experience as a man in Saudi, despite the challenges that I faced, is not equivalent to what Saudi woman goes through, especially around the time when I was in Saudi. And we're talking like 2005, 2006. So I just want to acknowledge that because there's no way for me to know what that's like. I can imagine it as I experience my own experience and walk my own path, but it's still very limited. And I think there's a lot of constraint and shackles that come from the social fabric and the programming of our society that we come up with in our life, and especially for Saudi women. And that's, again, another piece that I am very cautious about talking about, because it's a very low-hanging fruit for American, especially white feminists in America. It's like, oh, they want to talk about all the oppression that Saudi women face, but then when it's an oppression that other women face, that it gets dismissed. It's just, it reinforces certain ideas that people have. So I am trying to think of a way to speak about it, without putting down my own culture. But to say that there are challenges that women face in Saudi Arabia, or they faced back in the time I lived in Saudi, is understatement. Most women throughout their journey in Saudi, they are owned by their male guardian. They're limited. They have limited access to their own life, and that's a level that I don't even know what it does to someone's psyche from childhood to adulthood, and how does that get to be internalized and therefore cause shame and feeling disconnected to yourself, and therefore disconnected from everything else around you. So I think there's those layers that Saudi women face and live through, either through the social restriction or even the family restriction. There's a lot of conservative families, and there's that limit certain things. Like some women can't go to school, some women can't work, some women aren't allowed to do these things, even though, like, if we're looking at the government law changing in the past few years, it's still limited, because then you are constrained by your own family, right? And you can't do these things. So I believe that a lot of that cause some level of shame. And if we even look at it from what's happening in the US, we live in a society that is governed and led mostly by men. And in Saudi is the same case, and it's around the world. If I'm being honest, it's not specifically to one country. So a lot of those laws, a lot of those things that we do on a daily basis are framed based on that. They are made by man. The program is written by man. So it dismisses the experience and the things that women need to experience, or transgender, or anyone that's not a male in society. So I think, to answer your question, I believe all of those small or big aspects influence that shame that women feel.
I can't even imagine what it must be like to be in an environment where you're experiencing really oppressive standards, and then you go to a different culture And then they malign you for being part of a culture that had the oppressive standards while dumping you into a whole new set of oppressive standards. They're just different oppressive standards than the oppressive standards that you came from before. And so there's like how terrible it was to go through the initial experience, then trying to share your experience and having people tell you, oh yeah, it's because your culture's terrible in some way. And oh, by the way, all the ways that our culture is terrible is going to be kind of invisibilized to us because we're operating from this place of privilege, and privilege makes oppression invisible, right, for the people that are benefiting from it. So it's like bumping from one not great environment into another environment that's not great. Like where do you get the support? Where do you get the understanding? Where does someone actually just get to sit down with you compassionately and be like, that's terrible that happened to you, without anyone flipping the blame on it somehow your fault because you're a part of that culture, or you're still supportive of that culture in some way, or you uplift parts of that culture even if you don't uplift the entirety of the culture. The level of complexity that somebody would need to be able to hold to sit with somebody who is straddling both worlds like that feels immense.
It is. It's the hardest thing I had to navigate, and I still navigate in my daily life. And that's, if you feel me being hesitant to answer certain question, it comes from that. It's just, I was in spaces where I was given the pedestal, given the stage to talk about all this pain. And I've seen it in people's eyes. That's the only thing they see in me. And I hated that. They will try to come and talk to me after with like, oh, so that's what the Saudis do, huh? And you find yourself as like, well, not really. My family didn't do that. There's a lot of people don't do these things. And it's just like, how can you have that dialogue? Because on one side, they just like have this idea about your culture and stereotype, and almost my pain, and endorse that stereotype. And you just want to be present and be truthful to yourself and authentic in the way you communicate. But also, how can you do that without giving them ammunition to go and shoot your people?
Wow. I don't want to be providing fuel for people to go and shoot your people, others' people, anybody's people, my people, anybody's people.
But it is easy, and like we said, in our society, that there's money to be made in doing that. There's money to be made in having people fight, having people have these stereotypes, these ideas about different cultures. And one, it's entertainment. We're in America, after all. It's all about entertainment. And then two, there's the idea that if you dehumanize, like you mentioned before, an entire group, you can take their resources. Doesn't matter if a child is being enslaved so you can have an iPhone or the latest device. It doesn't matter. We dehumanize all people over the world, so it's easy for us to kind of just go on with our day. And we just bombed Libya, we bombed Gaza, we bombed all these places. Doesn't matter. It's far away. These people are savages. They've been doing this for hundreds and thousands of years. And that's also part of the thing we are trying to heal as a community. When we do these ceremonies, we are trying to heal from thousands of years of war. What do you expect from man that all they've known is war? We grow up in society that we're in Middle East. We've been at war since before Jesus was born. It's just war. And the thing that we get taught as we grow up is how to survive those wars. We don't have the luxury or the privilege of like, oh, you should go have vacation. Oh, go have fun in your life. We are taught about death more than we are taught about life, because we are more familiar with death than we are familiar with living. Most of our people just die or get killed. So that's part of what we are trying to do, is like, how can we utilize and work with this medicine to elevate the consciousness of our people so we can break that cycle? Because the Western world definitely is not interested in that happening, because if people are aware and not interested in fighting each other, then there is no money to be made. So it's up to us to actually help our own community heal from all of this, break the cycle, understand that there's value in living, seeing ways to live, giving people tools that help them live their life rather than giving them weapons so they can die.
That was powerful. I want to name that even when I ask you a question and there's a hesitancy or a caution in how you answer it, that hesitancy and that caution feels just as poignant as any answer you could give me, as a way to show people, if I was to tell you genuinely what my experience is, I can't actually trust people to not weaponize it against me or my people. And the lack of safety and even being able to share your experience, like, I actually feel like that's critical for people to understand, where you're like, I can't even tell you what's really going on without having to worry about whether or not you're going to use it against me and mine and the people that I care about. And as we're, yes, the wars have been going on for a long time, and it's not like the Middle East is solely responsible for all the conflict that's happening in the Middle East, and these global powers that come and interfere in order to have access to the resources, or because war is profitable and creates, this money-making machine. So even this idea of like, oh, that's happening over there, it's like, is it though? Like, we're involved. First of all, we're involved, at least at this stage. And while you're talking about all of this, I also want to hear you say that just focusing on the trauma, just focusing on the pain, just focusing on the most sensationalized parts of this story, it's not always necessarily what you want to talk about. And I do just want to take this moment. If there's a question I haven't asked you, or there's something that you would like to uplift, or there's another piece of this that I've been missing that you would like to share around the complexity of this experience, so that instead of me just coming in here and being like, talk to me about the pain, talk to me about the trauma, talk to me about the healing, like, is there a question you wished I would have asked you? Or is there something that you would like to mention in this moment?
I do want to talk about the beauty of our culture in a way. Like, we tend to forget that as we talk about the pain, because there's immense pain, but there's like powerful thing that happens in our culture, like, and we see it right now. We're seeing it in Gaza. You see all the atrocity, all the pain, all of that, and you go to people's videos and they're still joking, still singing, they're still dancing, they're still doing the things, the beauty in life. It's almost as if they are like teaching the world how to live. And it's ironic because they are experiencing pain that is unfamiliar to most of us on this planet. And we see it in different parts of our region. Like, I grew up in a community that was villagers and farmers, and we did not have all the means in life, but still there's the community around you. There's the people that will cook you food and bring it over. There's the idea of like, there's no night or day you'll go hungry in that community, because there's elders that decided every day of the week they are doing a feast. So each family within our own village will do a dinner, a feast every night. So my grandfather's was on Friday night, and we as kids will go and play, and my mother and her sisters and the family will work together on preparing the feast, and that's happened every day, every Friday. And then my uncle has it on Thursday, and so on. And there's that beauty and all of these things that we seem to miss as we talk about this pain. And I think in a way it's also relevant to us being in this culture and craving that community, and why we are doing this in a community, because we all grew up in a community, and it was the anchor of how we moved. It's that community, piece of it. It's like, oh, you give. My mom always says that heaven without people wouldn't exist. And so like we lived with those values, and I think there's beauty in all of that, that despite the challenges, despite being poor, despite all of these things, we always had each other, and there was power in that. And I think we forget that in any point of our life, whether we are going through financial stressors or whether job, whatever it is. And through my own journey, I've been imprisoned, I've been solitary confinement, I've been here, I've done all these things. And within all of that range, every level, I was able to experience happiness, joy, and sadness and all the other things. But I was able to also experience these things. So it doesn't matter where we are, we're always going to experience happiness and joy. So we might as well just embrace it and realize that, acknowledge that it exists, and not just be like, it's just death and war and awfulness.
Thank you for sharing all of that. I love this idea of thinking about heaven as the people that we get to be around again. Like that it comes back to community. That joy doesn't, like, yes, not being in poverty, having enough food, having access to safety, food, shelter, water, critical. And remembering that community is also critical.
Yeah. Thank you for allowing this space to be the way it is and have this conversation. It's really refreshing. It's been a while since I had a conversation where I didn't feel like I'm going to be attacked after.
I'm so sorry that that's your experience so often. I'm really glad that you're enjoying this conversation. I feel really grateful that I've been able to talk to you today and hear your experience. And I can tell like this is an area that I'm going to be throwing myself into a little bit harder after our call now. I really want to support you. I want to use the platforms that I have to support you. This feels like really important work. And thank you for allowing me to hold space with you while you share hard truths and real beauties and all of the complexity of this life.
Yeah, you're welcome.
If people want to find out more about you and this very important work that you're doing, where should they go? What should they do?
You can reach out to me on my email, on my website, my social media. It's all under my name. It's Malek Asfeer. Or reach out to Unlimited Sciences, as they are helping me with these studies and with these retreats coming up.
Amazing. Thank you. Good luck. And take care.
You too. Thanks.